Welcome to Greek for a Week. I'm glad that you are watching this week's video. We are going to continue our study in the book of 1 Peter, and we are going to diagram chapter 1, verses 13 through 16. Again, this is a part of a larger paragraph that can go just about through the rest of chapter 1 and likely even into chapter 2 as well. So I'm going to break this particular paragraph up into different chunks. So this week, after walking through verses 13, 14, 15, and 16, I thought it'd be a good idea to go ahead and diagram 13 through 16. So as we look at the Greek text here, we'll make note of the dia, the conjunction here at verse 13. I'll make note of that here in just a moment. Again, conjunctions, I like conjunctions. I like prepositions. They seem to help us with the syntactical relationships of verses and even phrases within verses. So you'll notice another conjunction here, alla, in verse 15, contrasting two elements. That is what not to do here in verse 14, and then eventually it will get to the point to what we should do then in verse 15. Then we have a reason or a cause for the imperative in verse 15 that ends the paragraph in verse 16. So I've labeled this hope and holiness, and you'll see why here in just a minute. So let's look at verse 13. The therefore connects what was previously stated verses, I would suggest verses verses 3 through 12. Connects then the following imperatives in verses 13 and 15. So he begins here with two participles, and I've labeled them as participles of means, and that is the means by which you can do the imperative, which we'll show here in just a minute. So by girding up, and then you also have by being sober-minded. Both of these are participles of means that eventually get us to the point to where he is asking his audience to eagerly, completely set your hope on what? On specifically the grace, and it's that grace that will eventually be brought to you when at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So again, here is the main emphasis here is set your hope. Then he says in verse 14, as obedient children, it's almost like he's saying, I'm going to establish some kind of a character about you, and I want you to be obedient children. And then what it is that he's going to ask them to do that follows obviously relates to this character of obedient children. He says, by not being conformed. And so you have here a participle of means again, but it's negated by the may. Again, this is going to be contrasted here in just a minute in verse 15. So he says, I don't want you to be conformed to what? To the former lusts when you were ignorant. So here we have another N, another preposition similar to this one up here in verse 13. Both of them I'm suggesting are temporal. But, so don't be conformed, but rather what I want you to do, specifically according to the Holy One. And then he further attributes a quality to that Holy One, and that is he's the one who has called you. So, but what I want you to do is you yourselves, I want you to be holy. So, not this up here in verse 14, but rather what I'm asking you to do is to be holy. And I want you to be holy in all of your conduct. Why? Because it is written, you will be holy because I myself am holy. So here again, Peter is really setting out to the side two main emphases for his audience, and that is that they are to eagerly set their hope and they are to be holy. So how can I preach or teach this? Again, I would maybe preach this as just one paragraph here, 13 through 16. I think there's a lot there that would be hard to pull out with other verses attached to it. So I think I'd probably stop here. And I would emphasize in the introduction of the message, because God is to be praised. Again, that was the entire focus, if you will, verses 3 through 12. Because God is to be praised for the believer's salvation. What then? Okay, that's the connector in verse 13 is the dia. Therefore or wherefore do these two things. Eagerly hope and be holy. So what we'll do next week is we'll look at verse 17 and following, likely go 17 through 22, and then we'll pause again and we'll diagram that passage. Trust this has been helpful for you. Really enjoying walking through 1 Peter. So again, have a great week, and we'll see you next week.